The government has said that Smart Motorways, that's where the hard shoulder is used as an extra lane, will continue, but with new safety measures introduced. Campaigners have been calling for them to be scrapped altogether after the deaths of 38 people in the last 5 years. Here's Transport Secretary Grant Shapps.
Overall, the evidence shows that in most ways smart motorways are as safe or safer than conventional ones, but they're not in every way, and I have therefore developed these new measures in order to further improve safety.
In a moment, we'll speak to Nick Leese, Head of Roads Policy at the RAC, but first Sam Cockerill. We've spoken to Sam many times from Sevenoaks, who is campaigning for safer roadside rescue and recovery. Morning to you, Sam.
Good morning.
And of course your story comes off the rather devastating backdrop that your partner Steve was killed on a motorway. It wasn't a smart motorway, but the point still stands about motorway safety.
Yeah, for me, it's dangerous enough when there is a hard shoulder, let alone when you take one away.
Yeah, and Steve was a recovery driver, is that right?
Yeah, he was recovering on the M25, and as he was loading his vehicle, he was struck in the hard shoulder by a lorry.
And one has to assume that same scenario on a smart motorway would cause, potentially a greater difficulty, which is what the argument seems to be, because there would be no hard shoulder at all in some places, and if you hadn't made it to one of those lay-bys, you'd be stuck there on the main carriageway.
Yeah, and I think for me, the chances are, if you break down on a smart motorway, the likelihood is it's going to be in the slow lane, and that's where all the lorries are, so the likelihood is it's actually going to be you're hit by a lorry. What
do you make to the government's announcement on this, Sam, after what Grant Shapps said? He recognises there are issues and wants to improve rather than scrap.
I think for me it's a step in the right direction, but I think there is an awful lot more that can be done. Ultimately, of course, I would like them to be scrapped completely, but realistically I can't see that happening. But I think that there is still an awful lot more that can be done. They're saying that the ERAs will be 3/4 of a mile apart, but on the when they did the pilot on the M42, they were 500 metres apart. So I think at a minimum they should be 500 metres
So
apart.
it starts, this is the interesting part, isn't it? So for many people, a little lay-by, as it were, 500 metres, every 500 metres is one of these lay-bys that you can tuck yourself into if your car breaks down. If it slows down due to engine trouble, you can get yourself to that. And then it appears, Sam, and I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist here, but it appears that over the years, that distance has sort of gradually moved without anybody saying very much about it.
Yes, that's my understanding, and I think on some stretches it's up to 2.5 miles.
You'd think there would have been almost a law that said, OK, you can have the smart motorway. The way it works is we put this in place, big red crosses, drivers have to learn more about what all the road signs mean, and every 500 metres there's going to be one of these bays. But 2.5 miles is a big old difference.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's shown that if someone can see that there's an ERA, they generally will be able to bump their car there, they'll be able to get there. But if they don't know how far away one is, the chances are that people aren't going to get there.
And in terms of driving on smart motorways, I mean, many will say, look, this is actually about drivers getting smarter as well. Most of these accidents are human error because drivers didn't adhere to the changing circumstances. They didn't spot the big red X that sits there winking at you from miles before. They stuck in the same lane they were in. They didn't realise the traffic in front was slowing down, despite the fact that the gantries are clearly telling you it's going down to 50, then to 40, then to 30. So much of this is about us learning how to drive better, Sam.
Without doubt, education. But I think also with regards to the road signs and the gantries, there's a lot of complacency because quite often you'll see there's a pedestrian in the road or there's work up ahead, and actually when you drive through it, there's nothing there. I do believe that there's complacency there as well. But I think people with the red X, people don't realise how dangerous it is and what could be ahead. And I think that's a lot of the problem. Well, there was nothing there the last 10 times I drove down.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It might have just been traffic calming before, and no sign suggesting what it was. And as you say, complacency sets in. So, they're doing that again. I'll just carry on driving as I was. Maybe that's about having tougher penalties or penalties at all for those who are driving in the X. You'd think we have ANPR cameras now. If you're driving in the lane with the X, could a fining system perhaps address this?
I believe so, yes. I know it would make a difference to the majority of people that I speak to, but I think there is just so much more that can be done here, and it all boils back down to education for me.
So driver education as much as anything else.
Yeah, if somebody sees something up above, up ahead of where they are, slow down and move over. If it's safe to get into the next lane, then get into the next lane. If you can see hazard lights, if you can see flashing beacons, slow down and move over.
Yeah. Sam, on that point, thank you. Sam Cockerill from Sevenoaks, who's campaigning from the campaign for safer roadside rescue and recovery. Her partner, Steve, was killed on a motorway while trying to assist another driver. Let's speak with Nick Leese, Head of Roads Policy at the RAC. Morning to you, Nick.
Good morning.
Talk us through the government announcement then. What does it contain that is substantially different to smart motorways?
Well, I mean, first of all, we welcome the government's moves to review this. We think that's a good thing, and certainly the Secretary of State, Grant Shapps, has been very engaged with us and others on this. The evidence stocktake, which the government published yesterday, contains, I think, an 18-point plan. And within that, what they're looking at doing is simplifying smart motorways, so they'll be ending the use of what we call dynamic hard shoulder motorways, where the motorway has a part-time hard shoulder. These will be converted to what we call all-lane running, where the hard shoulder is permanently removed. We're slightly sceptical as to whether or not that's the right way to go about things, but in addition to all of that, the government have announced that there'll be the rollout of stop vehicle detection technology. So this is the technology that will actually be able to pick up a vehicle that is stranded on a live lane. But the caveat here is that that's going to take 36 months, which we think is a long time. We understand there are practical implications, but that is a long time for that technology to be rolled out. They have mitigated that to some degree by saying that there'll be extra Highways England traffic officer patrols on these stretches of motorways. There are other parts of this that are also welcome, but it remains to be seen from our point of view as to whether or not it will make a huge difference. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it, looking at the various elements of the smart motorway, and I was slightly surprised to see that still when a vehicle breaks down, this is not some artificial intelligence that clocks that, it's the human eye that is required to see it, and that can take some time before somebody in a depot somewhere spots that a vehicle has broken down.
That's absolutely right. Now, the system that they use on the majority of the smart motorway network is something called Midas. Now, what that does is it picks up slowing traffic. So if traffic is slowing down, then the Highways Control Centre can pick that up, and then they can see from the cameras that they've got whether there is a vehicle that's stranded. Now, we've seen that on average it is taking between when a vehicle stops on the live lane to when the lane is closed and somebody is on their way to help. That can take up to 20 minutes on average. So that's a long time for a vehicle to be broken down and stranded in a live lane at the mercy of technology and at the mercy of somebody trying to pick them up.
Of course.
So it's some of the announcements that have come out is certainly positive. More traffic officers will help that, but we think also that perhaps there should have been a bit more money put forward for extra cameras and extra people in regional control centres to be able to spot these vehicles more quickly as we get that SVD technology rolled out.
And more of those laybys.
And more of the laybys, yes. So there is a welcome commitment within the announcement to install more emergency refuge areas on sections of the M25. The government has also said that they will consider a national programme to install more emergency refuge areas on existing smart motorways, but that's only a consideration at this stage. There is nothing set in stone about this, and they're going to use the M25 as a test case in effect to roll this out. But for us, we would like to see the same standard across the smart motorway network. Yeah,
and smarter drivers as well is always a bonus on the end of it all. Nick, thank you. Nick Leese, Head of Roads Policy at the RAC.
Time now.